Westchester County without something from the Chinese Ulu Sai. So for all people who love the Ulu Sai, this is especially for you. And for those of you that might have never heard of Ulu Sai, that's the way I was all my life until I went to China. I learned how to say Wa Hong Gao Shi Lai Dao Chengdu. I am happy to be in Chengdu because I was there for 3 weeks to learn one sentence. And I also learned a little bit about the Hulu Sai. So this would be an extremely brief piece using the Hulu Sai, which will begin in the plaintive, traditional manner of their wonderful use of the pentatonic scale, and then show that like anything can be used in just about anything, just as in cooking, if you can put it together correctly. So this would be a little bit of some Westchester County Hulu Sai mournful Wednesday evening blues. The first and most assuredly the final performance. Westchester County, I'm sure that you will feel every day. I feel so blue when the sun goes down, even though I'm happy that that scalding heat wave seems to have gone away. But in your subconscious you hear an ancient song singing to you, and those ancient spirits seem to say, Hulu Sai, Your spirits make me feel so high. I wonder why I even have to try to learn, to understand the mysteries of the Hulu side. Well, the answers, my friend, can't be found in Confucius's writing or anything else that you find authentic and exciting. Rather in the book, Common Sense. You can get it without having to use your hard-earned pence. Because Asian philosophy proves it's not what you feel. That's only what you glockenspiel. Before you go, the ancient wise men and women said, if you can't spell it, you can't sell it. So we're gonna sing on Hulu side, don't you know? Here we go now. H-U-L-U-S-I almost spells Hulu side. H-U-L-U-S-I almost spells Lucide. Yes, H-U-L-U-S-I almost spells Lucide. Used to always say when we were doing Shakespeare in the Park and the show would run too long, brevity is the soul of wit. So we're going to do one little reading about a magnificent person that, again, I didn't get to mention enough in the film, but who was so influential when I was 21 years old. And I try to encourage other people, now who are 21 years old, to find people who can inspire them so that when they become 82, they can pass that on to the next people. And that means in 300 and 400 years, we're going to have a civilization no matter what. So with that heavy thought in mind, I'd like to introduce someone who's going to read from my own life experience, my first book called Vibrations, which I was lucky to write in 1968 and allowed, fortunately, to do the best that I could. These are little excerpts from one little part, one of my basement apartment, 1815 16th Street Northwest, in the winter of 1952, as everything else in my life, meeting Larry, meeting everyone here, stumbling and fumbling my way into good fortune, I had a chance to meet the great Charley Parker. And like Woody Guthrie and so many other people, in fact, it was Woody Guthrie's friend Ahmed Bashir, who was also a mutual friend of Charley Parker's, that was who introduced me to Woody Guthrie. No career counselor or astrologer, faith healer, or a guru with a limo could possibly figure that out. It was just good fortune. And this was something that I wrote about that. We've never done this before, but my daughter, Adira, who's expecting our first grandchild next month, was kind enough to come up with her husband, Amram, grace us with her presence. She's a wonderful actress, a comedian, has all of her own things that she does, but she's nice enough to join us tonight to read this little part about meeting Charley Parker, 1952, in Washington, D.C. So please welcome one of the three blessings of my life with my three beautiful children, our second child and daughter, talented actress, Adira, Amram.
I promised I wouldn't fall off the stage, so. Oh, fall off the stage? Oh. No, I promised them. Look, they put the white tape just for me. This is pregnancy tape. So this is from Vibrations. Charley Parker, 1952. In the winter of 1952, fellow musicians Buddy Rowell, his wife Stella, band leader Joe Timer's wife Jo, and I went down to the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C. to hear Charley Parker. I'd been listening to his records for over 5 years. Most of them I had worn out from hearing them so many times. He was a legendary hero to all of us. And Jo knew him well, being an excellent jazz singer herself, and so she said she'd introduce us after the concert. There was a special air of excitement at Howard, as if the president were to arrive. You could feel it all during the movie, which was shown right before the stage show, just like a buzzing one hears before the closed-circuit telecast of the heavyweight championship fight. People not really concentrating on the movie, but waiting for the great event to come. After the movie was over, the Clovers appeared, a fine vocal group, but, you know, they seemed like crowd pleasers. But they knew that the next big thing was to come after them. Finally, the lights went down. The announcer came out and said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the world's greatest saxophonist, Charley." And before he could say Parker, out came the piercing sound of Charley Parker's saxophone from behind the curtain. The band began playing cool blues. The curtain opened, and there was an unforgettable sight of Bird wearing striped green pants, baggy at the knees, with scuffed brown shoes, one toe occasionally tapping every few measures, holding his alto, which seemed almost like a toy saxophone. He'd grown so heavy during these years. His jacket, double-breasted, purple, was covered by huge lapels and was unbuttoned. Some kind of crazy orange tie bobbed up and down. He was playing with such concentration that the entire band seemed to be focused at the tip of his horn. Next to him was Kenny Dorham, a brilliant trumpet player, Teddy Kotick, the bassist, Stan Levy, the drummer, and Walter Bishop Jr., the pianist. The hush of the audience was unbelievable. As Bird played, there was a tremendous tension that could be felt by everyone in the hall. The only relaxed person seemed to be Bird himself, who was smiling affably except when he played. He had an incredible kind of projection in person that even his records couldn't capture. His records are great documentations of his great musical mind, but that night he played completely different choruses on many of the tunes that I had listened to time and time again. Even if I hadn't learned his records, his recorded choruses as I had, I could have sensed the abandonment with which he played. He was one of the great master improvisers. To him, his horn was just like whistling, or even more like thinking out loud. If you could imagine someone like Nijinsky, or even more recently Nureyev, doing his famous leaps on a tight wire, 100 feet off the ground, no net below, blindfolded at the same time, that is how Bird played. He had such grace and abandonment and daring that after a while you didn't even think of it that way, but just soared along with him. I saw that he and his music were much greater than even his legend. After the show was over, Joe's wife said, "Let's all go backstage and say hello to Bird. He's a really beautiful cat." And we all went back. Bird recognized Joe right away, greeted her warmly. Bird was nice to all of us, but he looked a little surprised at my outfit. I had on the shoes I wore as a gym teacher, which were called canoe shoes, sort of like sandals with a zipper in the middle. And my frayed suede jacket, which made me look somewhat like a good-natured juvenile delinquent, I suppose. And when Joe told him that we were all musicians and that I was a gym teacher too, he seemed very interested. "That's crazy," he said. "We gotta talk about my kids. They're going to school." He had the kind of eyes that made you feel he had known you all his life and could tell your whole story immediately. "You wait for me, man," he said. "I want to drop off 2 people somewhere and then we'll hang out." "Great," I said. Buddy and Stella and Joe told Bird that we'd have some of his friends and fans come meet him over at my basement. I waited for Bird. He came down in a few minutes. I took him to my car, a battered 1932 Plymouth, which featured a little rug in the back seat with 2 Tintoretto reproductions from the National Gallery of Art on either side, just to make it a little more homey. As we rode to my place, we talked a little about music. When we got down into the basement, it was already crowded with the cream of Washington's hipsters, who had somehow heard through the underground network during the hour and 30 minutes since he had left the theater that Bird was going to be there. These were the people who always looked at me rather askance before. They thought I was out of my mind because of the rustic way I dressed, because I played French horn and was a gym teacher. They usually gave me the freeze. Most of them, who were not musicians, had never come to my jam sessions. It didn't seem like a hip enough scene because of the wild conglomeration of guests. Musicians themselves are very seldom snobs. The better they are, the more open-minded they are, and the more they like all different kinds of people and experiences. But quite often fans of artists are exactly the opposite. Still, here they all were in tribute to Bird in my cluttered up, down-home basement apartment. When Bird got to the doorway, the first thing he said was, "Man, doesn't Modigliani have a lot of soul?" He recognized the Modigliani, one of my many reproductions hanging on the walls, and was able to identify all the others as well. He looked around with his all-seeing eyes and got the message that he thought a lot of people there were phonies. "Man, what you got to scarf?" he said in a rather loud voice, thus showing everybody he would join them after he had something to eat, getting him off the hook, and at the same time being able to fortify himself by plunging into the den of vipers. I took him into my tiny kitchen and we opened up the icebox. When he saw the wild collection of food, he roared with laughter. "My man," he said, "I see I'm in the presence of a stone gourmet." We proceeded to make borscht with sour cream, with all kinds of vegetables in it, and some broccoli with sour cream, and a crazy omelet I cooked up with fried onions, marmalade, maple syrup, bacon, tomatoes, covered with hot mayonnaise, with some garlic fried in it, and a little cheese sauce. Take that in. So Bird was fascinated by my cooking. We both wolfed down our portions of it, chased it with some borscht, and, of course, orange soda. I could see that Bird really enjoyed life and loved to eat. After we finished our gourmet dinner, we went into the other room where his fans were patiently waiting, and he proceeded to sit back in an armchair like the king he was and entertain everyone. I put on some of his records, and he listened intently. During most of the other solos, he was laughing and giving encouragement to the musicians as if they were recording it at the time. At the same time, he was eyeing everyone in the room, answering questions, but still seeming to be somewhere else all the time. He not only had simultaneous time in his playing and got other people to play that way, but he seemed to be able to operate on 5 or 6 levels at the same time, plus another that was all his own. Because of his great warmth and kindness, he seemed more like a country boy than a great jazz musician. And everyone in the room felt beautiful. And many of us there that night are still friends today. I found that everyone that knew Bird well and had a certain common bond, just in the memory of him and his music, after the evening was finally over, he invited me to come back and see him, to talk to him about music and sit in with him. He also said perhaps he could come down to my basement and play. He was interested in the French horn and told me about the group of strings he had, and that Joe Singer, the French hornist, was on a recording he'd made. As I drove him to his hotel, we talked about classical music. In addition to being so fond of Stravinsky and Bartok, he also loved the music of Delius, and it was Charley Parker who made me aware of Delius' music for the first time. Listening to Delius' music in a certain way made me understand Charley Parker better, and vice versa. Just before we got to his hotel, we passed an outdoor hot dog stand, and Bird's eyes lit up. Got eyes? And I say, sure. So we stopped and had about 4 or 5 hot dogs and 2 sodas apiece. We said goodnight, and he assured me that he wanted me to come back again and see him. Bird came over to my place the final time to hear our little group with flute, bassoon, and myself the night before he closed the Washington. He played his riffs and then did some free improvising. Bird was fascinated by the bassoon. Whispering in my ear, he said, "That cat's a bitch," referring to Kenny Pasmatic's bassoon virtuosity. He asked Kenny to play the famous bassoon solos from The Rite of Spring, Tchaikovsky's 4th Symphony, and many other bassoon solos with which Bird was apparently quite familiar. "Why don't you play the saxophone?" I said to Spencer. And Spencer said, "If you were a saxophone player, you know why I don't play." "Listen," said Bird to Spencer, "I know how you feel, but man," he said, "you have to love your horn and live with it and spend your whole life with it, and after a while, if you love it enough, it will become part of you, and you'll feel as if it's that you're part of it, and it'll love you, and it'll become your best friend." This was the advice that later took me through some of the hardest periods of my life. Bird had to catch the train. He said we'd have to play together when I came to New York, and what a ball he'd had. I felt the same way. That was the spring of 1952, the last time I saw Bird. Charley Parker's whole concept of music, his dedication to it, and the spirit he created influenced me as a composer as much as any other musician that I can think of. His music made me aware that every sound is related to every other sound. He was like an architect, and a painter, and a poet, all at the same time. His attitude of an open mind and an open heart, of playing with anybody, listening to everything, trying to appreciate everything, and then being able to distill all those experiences in his own way, all this affected me and a whole generation of people enough to get the message. Bird's whole life was dedicated to perfecting his art. While the whole era of bebop, the mystique, and the social mores and patterns have changed totally since his death, his music and the influence of his music are stronger than ever.
Which is a good sign. Because again, that's just a map quest, like everything else that we try to do. We're going to do one short piece because we do respect the theater.